Hi everybody, and welcome to School Scene. My name is Ray Estes. I'm the current chair of the school committee for at least a little while longer, and maybe while you're watching this I will no longer be chair, but wanted to take this opportunity to reach out to the community and share some information about things that are going on in the school district, and in particular something that's been a real treat for my family and something I've personally enjoyed over the years is the annual Cape Cod fourth grade field trip. And I'm here with Chuck Cormier, who is the longtime principal Plymouth River School, and we're here to talk about really the gem of PRS and what has become really legend in town, and that's the rite of passage of fourth grade at PRS and going on this this 3-day, 2-night trip to Cape Cod at the Brewster Sea Camps each September. It's an opportunity to explore the different environments that the Cape has to offer with respect to tidal pools, sand dunes, salt marshes, cedar swamps, Marconi Station, to name a few, and we'll go into detail a little bit about each of those in a moment. But it's also an opportunity for the fourth grade early on in the year to come together as a community of fourth graders, team building efforts and exercises, games and sports and other activities. And it's also an opportunity for the kids to really get away from home, perhaps for the first time in many of their young lives. And it's really part of the science curriculum at PRS, and helps to really create a terrific foundation for the science curriculum for the entire year, and even preparing them for the MCAS in the 5th grade that's coming. It's an exploration about the adaptation of different species in their respective environments on the Cape, and first-hand opportunity for kids to really explore, get their hands in there, get their feet wet, dig in the swamp and whatnot, and explore for themselves and learn about how species evolve, how they survive, and how things are and why things are the way they are today, particularly on the Cape. So I wanted to introduce Chuck Cormier, who is, as I said, longtime principal at PRS. Chuck is in his 21st year as principal at Plymouth River School. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is you know, a terrific trip. I have 4 children. I've had 3 go on the trip. I've gone twice as a chaperone, once as an instructor, and I have a rising 4th grader this coming fall, and I'm guessing I'm going to be making the trip to Brewster.
You sure will.
And I'm looking forward to it, and perhaps as an instructor again, and really enjoyed my time, particularly last year as an instructor, kind of helping the kids you know, learn about the different environments and the different species, and how they adapt and survive in those environments. And I just wanted to ask a few questions, and we can talk about, you know, the specifics of the trip and really what you hope the kids get out of it. And let's start at the beginning. So you came from another district about 21 years ago. How did the idea for the trip develop, and how has that experience changed over the years?
Well, interesting. It actually started in Acton Public Schools, where I was a science social studies coordinator there in the late 70s and early 80s. And we did something called Project Adventure. And that trip took us to Sergeant Camp in Peterborough, New Hampshire, where we did half science activities in a wooded and pond setting, and half adventure activities. That later on in that program, we shifted to Camp Borndale on the Cape and started to do a program there that was actually run by college interns. When I left there and I went to Mansfield in 1986, I then moved the program to Cape Cod entirely, but discovered that my teachers, who were well-versed, who at that time were well-versed in science as they are today, could do an equally good job as the college interns did. So I trained teachers at that time. And when we went down there, interestingly enough, in the 80s, it was just 4 teachers and myself.
Wow.
So we had teachers stayed with their entire class But as we did that, the groups became a bit cumbersome because they were large, and it was hard to manage them and hard to get them involved in science the way we wanted to. When I came to Hingham, the shift, sort of at the end of Mansfield to Hingham, the shift was to engage parents as instructors and bring parents on the trip. So that allowed us to do these small study groups, which you were familiar with last year, in which
Sure.
you were responsible for approximately 10 to 12 students. You spent a day on the Cape with me, and I trained several parents to go on the trip. Nice thing is you'll be repeating this year as some parents did last year. So the concepts and skills of science are now embedded in you, and will make for an easier transition year after year.
Oh, I held on to my study materials, so.
Exactly. And so, as you know, I do that. I provide each parent with a group of study materials to give them some background knowledge and to help them on the activities that we do. So that's the major feature in changes of it really was moving to engage parents in the program as, which you did for 2 years,
Sure.
as simply chaperones,
Right.
which is a very difficult job, sleeping with those kids every night.
Well, it certainly is a challenge, and getting some of them to shower is
a bigger
sometimes
challenge.
but,
That's why I've often said, brush your teeth and wash your hands.
That's right. No, it was a great opportunity for me, certainly. Let me ask you, why the 4th grade? Why is it that level?
You know, it's interesting. When I came to Hingham, when I introduced the program, there were several parents who did not send their kids, and they thought they were way too young for it. I thought that, at first I thought they weren't too young, especially if we were involving a lot of parents, and we have. And secondly, 4th grade is focused on botany.
Sure.
And my goal is to provide an authentic setting to apply skills learned in the classroom to the real world. So that's why we chose Cape Cod, because we had a variety of plants and animals in this coastal biome that make a number of adaptations to live in that environment, and we could compare that setting to the setting in the classroom, and we were doing controlled planting and looking at a variety of variables, including pollination and reproduction. So that's really why 4th grade was decided. Another different decision is most schools do this program in the spring. The problem with the spring on Cape Cod is it's very cold.
Sure.
As you know, right now the weather hasn't been wonderful, and schools are starting out there in the spring. The other reason we chose the fall was that to build classroom community, to start off the year with our 4th graders together working and learning on Cape Cod, and that's really reaped a lot of rewards for us.
Yeah, no, I think it's a terrific idea. I've spent time in the Cape at different times of the year growing up there, growing up and visiting the Cape for sure, and you're right. If you go in the spring, April, May,
It's very cold.
It can be very, very chilly. And the summer, you know, the sun stays, and you go, you know, 3rd week of September,
Right.
and particularly tell us about the place that we stay. I think it's the Brewster Sea
Right.
Camps, and that's a regular summer camp.
It's a regular summer camp that it's got primarily an 8-week program. Kids from all over the world come there, and it's got quite an alumni. Started in the early 1900s. It also has day programs and week-long programs. So once late August occurs, their programs are over, so
Right.
they rent the camp out to a variety of school groups. When we go, as you know, we might get only one other school group there in a place that can house 600 students.
Right.
So wonderful spot, right on the ocean, and we have a dining hall and excellent chefs that cook our food for us. So we're just responsible for the science,
Right.
and that's what I like.
No, that's terrific, and I'll say, you know, I think one of the greatest things that the kids enjoy the most is, you know, part of that independence. That, you know, obviously they're supervised at all times.
Right.
They are given some free time here and there, but never without someone knowing where they are,
Right.
paying attention. But part of that independence is going to the dining hall, getting online, getting your tray, and choosing what you want to eat, and sometimes perhaps indulging a little bit more
Exactly.
than they might at home.
Trying to get that extra dessert.
But you know what? For that 3 days, it's okay.
Yeah.
And they have the time of their lives, and you'll see the looks on their faces when they, in the morning, where they can go to the cereal containers,
Right.
or they can get extra bacon or whatever it is. It's really just been fun to watch.
Yeah, it's managing their diet, managing themselves.
That's right. Well, that's terrific. So let's talk about the different environments that you
Okay.
visit. So I think I mentioned we certainly explore the tidal pools and the sand dunes, and that's typically real
Right.
close to the sea camps right there. Then we've got the salt marsh and the white cedar swamp. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about each of those places?
Well, each environment offers us a different insight into adaptations of plants and animals, and that's really what the goal of this trip is looking at that big idea of adaptation. So the white cedar swamps gives us an environment that is has a high acidity in its water. It has pure stands of white cedar, which are an interesting tree because they are rot resistant and insect resistant, used in colonial times to build ships. And very few white cedar swamps are alive today. So that's a unique environment for us. The sphagnum moss and how it grows, different kind of plant for kids to see. And so it's all about comparing and contrasting. And then we move to a salt marsh that is the nursery for all small organisms, and which then later grow up and move out to the sea. Filters water, purifies water in the ocean for us, acts like a sponge. And we can then get into that environment and compare that saltwater environment to that white cedar swamp, and then how it differs slightly to the tide pool,
Right.
which we go into, which is more open, less plants for us to look at, adaptations there. We're going to be looking at dune grass and the plants of the dunes, and then comparing that to adaptations of animals, such as snails and crabs and worms and so forth. So we go to each environment, but we do a lot of comparing and contrasting
Right,
for
and
that principal idea.
And while we're at those environments, exploring the salt marsh, exploring the cedar swamp, and at the cedar swamp, Chuck will get off the path and he'll dig in
Right.
to the peat, and we'll explore, the different aspects of that. And what are the kids doing while we're exploring this? And I know the instructors are asking questions, they're reminding about
Right.
the different species and how they adapt to the different environments, but what are the kids doing, and what's the goal from their time
Well,
there?
we hope what they're doing is trying to get them all to focus on what you're trying to show them.
Right.
And then trying to do some exploration in themselves. I mean, part of this is also teaching them how to observe. Often students will say to me, how come you're seeing everything? And it's because you have to be patient, you have to look and look. And so in that case, when I'm pulling up the peat, I'm trying to show them the process of decay, and how at the top layer we can see some red maple leaves and some cedar needles. And as we go further down, it loses less of its structure, and then we end up with this thick peat. And so they can see the process of decay over the years, which then yields this peat product that we talk about in there. So a lot of it is about teaching them how to observe. A lot of it is process skills.
Right. And then when they go back to their cabins or the dining hall, and we spend a lot of time as a group in the dining hall, that's kind of our home base. What do they do? They do some journaling, and what's the goal from that?
Well, a lot of what we have decided a while ago is, and when I first started this trip, I was trying to get kids to record and do a lot of analysis while we were at the site. And I found with the number of kids, it became very difficult. They were dropping journals in the water. It was difficult to write unless we sat them down. So our goal now is to go out, completely immerse ourselves in that environment. In this case, could be the white cedar swamp. And then we have something we now call conceptual development, and that's been a big change in the trip, in which teachers and instructors like yourself sit down with their group, and we go over the page that's aligned with the environment. And we also bring a few samples with us to talk about where we saw those samples, what part of the environment they were in, what their adaptations are, and possibly even do some sketching.
Right.
So we call that phase conceptual development because it's taking the messing around with science part that I like to call it, and then trying to put it in, explain the ideas to the students, or have them try to explain them.
Right, and then once they get back to the classroom after the trip's over, they take those journals and that experience and they turn that into a piece of writing.
Right, exactly. And I think just to commend my teachers on that, another big change that's occurred in the program has been not only relating it to the science, but relating it to language arts. So teachers on the team have revised the journal several times, and now they've revised it so it can reflect more of what we want to do in the classroom around expository writing. So when they get back to the classroom, there's some research that they will do on the different habitats. So we have that authentic learning piece where we get direct hands-on experience. We have research in a variety of informational texts. And then we move from there, and kids then develop narratives, Cape Cod narratives on the environments that they study. Wonderful pieces of writing, in all aligned with the new writing program, Empowering Writers, the skills taught there. So I think that's a big piece for us that's grown, and very proud of that.
Oh, that's terrific. So you mentioned samples, and I know you
Right.
brought some samples with you. A lot of them look like they come from the dunes or
Yeah.
the tidal pools.
Well, a lot of
perhaps?
them are from the tidal pool.
Right.
You know, I do have some plants here that I actually saved from last year.
Ah.
So I'll start with this one.
You get some
which-
nice specimens last year.
Yeah, beautiful specimens. So this I found on the beach, and you know, with erosion occurring and on the sand dune. Of course, this is a good example of dune grass, but it's all dried out. But the thing that we talk to kids about, again, focusing on that word adaptation, is the development of rhizomes. And because the environment is so dry that the seeds from the dune grass cannot germinate on the soil, that they depend on reproduction through rhizomes. So underneath that sand, they send out a horizontal stem, and every 2 or 3 inches, a nodule develops and these little roots form. And we talk to kids about that because it's a unique adaptation. It's like living in a desert. The seed will not germinate even though it has seeds.
Sure.
And so I try to dig under the sand and try to get them to feel the rhizomes, which is now holding that dune in place. So important adaptation for a plant.
And that's often why you see signs on the dunes when you go to the beach. They stay off the dunes.
Stay off the
because
dunes,
if
exactly.
you will disturb the rhizome structure which holds the
Right.
dunes in place.
Exactly. So it's like throwing a net over the dunes.
Right.
Another sort of interesting feature.
Now, this is great.
this.
You found this one last year and you held it up and you said plant or animal.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people say, well, plant, because they've never seen anything like
Sure.
it. So this is, believe it or not, this whelk, knobbed whelk, lays this egg case. And so the adaptation there is, every little disc here has about 50 little baby whelks in it. And actually, when we have stations with microscopes there on our last day, we open those up and they see these little whelks under microscopes. That the number of whelks that this are whelk eggs, so to speak, that this whelk is laying is certainly an adaptation. Because so many of these organisms hatch, they'll be eaten by larger predators. So that's an interesting plant. This one is a moon snail, and we talk to kids about this because it's really very important, because its adaptation is it has something called a radula, which is a tongue that's sort of got sandpaper on it. It's very rough, and when you see a hole in a shell, you will often think, why is that hole there? Well, the hole is there, it's not from erosion, is that this moon snail, its body has gone out, covered the shell. Could be something like this.
A clam or a scallop or
and covers it,
mussel.
and then
Yep.
rubs its tongue on it, eventually getting a hole in it and then drawing out the body. So interesting adaptation. When kids look at the simple periwinkle in that tide pool, they will see something called an operculum, which this snail also has, and it will be like it's
Like
material
your fingernail.
Yep. And if you touch it, it's sealed up, but it takes in a little bit of water and a little oxygen so that it can sit on that rock for up to 4 or 5 hours while the tide is out and survive. And finally, one of our fun creatures is this basic mussel that you think that you eat, and what's so special about this? Well, a mussel has, most bivalves have a foot that buries themselves in the sand, like the coal hog I showed you, or like a steamer clam. But this mussel has a flabby foot, so it can't do that. So it sends out something called byssal threads that attach to rocks. And many times, if you're having mussels, somebody will say, well, you got to clean off the beard.
The beard, sure.
Well, the beard is the byssal threads that attach itself to a rock so that it's not thrown about in the ocean. And actually, when they're very small, when there's a colony of mussels and they become too tightly knit, they can actually release those threads and float off and go to another rock. So mussel has a unique set of adaptations that allow it to survive in that harsh environment. You have also, we'll show kids differences in crabs. Not all crabs certainly are alike. And we have a blue crab that's lost its color, but it's a swimming crab. It's got little paddles that allow it to swim. This is not a swimming crab. This is a spider crab. Its adaptation kind of lets algae grow all over it. It's so slow moving. And what happens with that is predators can't see it as well, but we certainly can find them. So we get those two differences.
I met one of those spider crabs when I was very, very young on the beaches of Cape Cod. It was not a fun experience.
No, it wasn't.
And what's great about the blue crabs, those flippers you said help them swim.
Right.
They also dig in the sand and let them bury themselves backwards.
Pretty quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's, again, that's something that when kids are out there in the tide pool, they want to find crabs, but it's getting them to sit down and showing them a crab and let it go and watching that dig. And them observing that is very, very important. And finally, I'll show you this specimen, which I know everybody knows, and this is sort of the specimen to find when you're there in Cape Cod, is a horseshoe crab. But I like kids to, and I have collected so many of these, so when there's that rainy day on the Cape, we may just pull them all out and just do a study of horseshoe crab anatomy. But great specimen. A lot of people think that this is a dead crab. Well, of course, you know, and I know it isn't. It's a molt that they molt often as they get large and their shell doesn't grow with them, and they form a new shell and they crawl out the front. But simple adaptation we show to kids is I ask them, so what do you think this tail is for? And of course, it's to sting, is what they think. And one of its primary functions is when it's like this and it's flipped over, it puts it into the sand and it allows itself to flip over again. At the Harvard Museum of Natural History, there are fossils of horseshoe crabs that look exactly like this going back 3 or 4 million years. So it's truly one of our dinosaurs. Interesting set of gills kids can see, so we can talk about gills. Big parts, easy for kids to look at, easy to get across the idea in an organism, whether it be plant or animal, structure and function. There's a structure, what is the function? Important concept in science because it's what we call a cross-cutting concept. It goes across all disciplines.
Sure, and, the way you get this across to the kids, they're learning things and they don't even realize they're learning it.
They don't.
And then when you get back to the camp and you talk about it and you kind of do that, you know, decompression and it's remarkable how much you have the questions at lunch and dinner and give away prizes, books typically, and it's remarkable what the kids learn in a short period of time.
It is. I guess that's when you ask, what is the favorite part of the trip for me, for example? It's that reward of seeing kids learning, seeing them working with their peers, and those kinds of things are really important. But yeah, it's the learning and not knowing you learn.
I know, that's just terrific. Now, one of the other things you do, and so folks at home, this is a 3-day, 2-night trip. Usually leave early in the morning from PRS on the Wednesday, usually around the 3rd week of September. Stay Wednesday night, stay Thursday night. Thursday night's the annual campfire, final night on the Cape. And then Friday, right after lunch, around 1:30 or so, the buses head back to Hingham from the Cape. And it's jam-packed with activity. I'll tell you, as a parent who's chaperoned and been an instructor, there's not a lot of downtime.
No.
And that's probably a better thing for the kids because they have a ton of energy. And you fill the days not only with these activities and these trips to the different environments to explore and learn, but also there's structured games and sports. The gym teacher comes, the art teacher comes. There's mural designing and painting, a lot of time spent on that. Other arts and crafts activities, and the organized sports activities. You do the early morning walks down to the beach. You do the late night walk down to the beach. And that's a time when really you get an opportunity to look and listen, and really listen, and identify all the different sounds that you hear when it's really pitch black down there at the water.
Yeah, well that's, and I think that sort of decompression time is good. It's still an activity. Some of it is voluntary, for example, that morning walk. But it's wonderful getting kids up. They're up anyway.
Sure.
At 6:30, rather than playing soccer before they have breakfast, it's nice to have a group of kids follow me down there and just walk the beach and see what they find, and having these informal discussions, getting to know each other better is always an important thing. You bring up that last day, which is an important day for us. That's sort of our performance assessment that we do with kids, in which kids move from a phys ed station to a mural station to a sample station to a station with typically with a person from the National Seashore discussing marine life. Important stuff for us to see what kids have learned. Those murals tell us a lot. And I would say another big change in the program over the last 2 years, especially since we hired a new art teacher, Holly Kelfer, is her ability to see the link between science and art. So she has been coming along for a couple days and has been introducing new activities that correlate the two disciplines. So she's done a nice job there. Last year she was there at 6:30 in the morning and doing structures in the sand with kids who wanted to do it. So it's nice having that piece.
Terrific. What would you say is your favorite part of the trip?
The favorite part of the trip, I know the kids certainly, the favorite part of the kids' trip is the tidal pool, without doubt. And the second favorite part is being in the cabins with their friends.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it's the reward of seeing kids engaged in messing around with science, seeing that learning going on in each of the three environments, seeing that student who may have learning issues, seeing him come alive on the Cape Cod trip, asking important questions and really being invested in his or her learning. I think those are the big rewards for me. Also coupled with the adults that are there, so those adults acting as good role models, my teachers, instructing kids in science and working with them in ways that we just can't work with them in classrooms. And certainly my parents, both chaperones and instructors, who take the roles seriously and study if you're an instructor. That's important to me. So I think it's all of us working together, and in the end we just build this wonderful fourth grade community. Parents, administration, teachers, and kids. So that's what's important to me. But I do have an affinity for the White Cedar Swamp.
Oh, that is a lot of fun.
It's a very different environment.
No, well, it certainly is a terrific trip, and I echo what you say about the teachers. You know, the efforts that they put forth, and it's a really great experience because there's still teachers in that outdoor classroom, and they have a job to do in order to convey, that science curriculum, but they do it in a way that is so engaging, and I find, in my experience going with them, they're a little different outside of the classroom, even though they're still in the teaching mode. And it's really enjoyable. And it's terrific to see the kids kind of just absorb all of that information and knowledge in their exploration. And they're doing it, it's because I think a lot of it they're doing independently, and they're doing it in such a great environment. And they're doing it with, a lot of parents around, teachers who are nurturing. You are a rock star on this trip.
Thank you.
I mean, you're a rock star at PRS to begin with, but on this trip, this is all about you and your love of science and the curriculum, and the kids really, really eat that up, and it's really fun to watch.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to thank you for your time today. This has been a terrific opportunity to spend a few minutes with Principal Chuck Cormier of PRS. there is a trip that happens every year in September. It's the 4th grade annual trip to the Cape Cod Sea Camps in Brewster. It's an exploration of science and adaptation of different environments and species. If you have been a parent of a child going through PRS in the last 20 years, you know about this trip, and you've probably even been on it once or twice. If you haven't, you know, maybe there's an opportunity to talk to the administration about making this a district-wide opportunity. It's a really exciting thing. I know I talk to parents of kids who go to the other elementary schools, and they're very envious of the experience that kids have on this trip. And maybe it's something that that can be explored for a district-wide opportunity. I know I'm very fortunate to have had kids gone through PRS and to have experienced this trip firsthand. I have one more opportunity for that apparently this fall, and I'm looking forward to it. And I just wanted to thank Chuck Cormier again, and really, you know, let folks know at home that if they're sending their kids to this trip and they're a little concerned, perhaps, not to worry. They're in good hands with Chuck and the teachers, and they're going to learn a lot, and they're going to have the time of their lives. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.